Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pathfinder Leadership. We're in Season 1, Episode 3, and I appreciate everyone who has viewed or listened to the last couple of podcasts. We've been diving into, what gives your host, LP, the credibility, and then last week we talked about what is a leader. And if you listened last week, I asked you to get your notebook out and I asked you to write down a few things. One of which is I asked you to figure out what your fears were, whether they are things in your personal life that you are fearful of, or whether it is something professionally that scares you. And I shared with you how my fear of failure drives me towards success. I also talked you to think about start building your legacy now. So we talked about the name on your shirt versus the badge and the oath that you could have sworn if you're law enforcement, or the oath you swore if you were military, But if you're in the private sector, you still have that responsibility towards your job. And yes, there are some jobs that just do not treat their people well. And the final thing that I asked you to consider is what your leadership qualities are. And I'm challenging you to, look inside yourself. And if you're a humble person and you don't feel like talking good about yourself or saying positive things about yourself, you're in good company, because I feel the same way. I'm definitely not a narcissist. I have a hard time being confident. I have to exude confidence at work. And we've talked a little bit about that. But there are times where I just don't feel as comfortable as I should, or as confident as I would like to be. And so some of the things that I really want to focus on in episode 3 is handling adversity. And, part of that can be facing your fears, depending on what your fear specifically is. A lot of what I'm going to talk about this week is going to be more off the cuff. So you'll notice, if you have already, that we're releasing the podcast a little bit later than normal. There's a reason behind that. I wanted to spend last night with my wife. And this podcast is important. And this message getting out and pushing myself is important. But also spending quality time with my wife will always take precedent. She's in bed now, so I'm gonna spend this time talking to you and going through on how to face adversity and overcoming some of your fears. So in 20 years of law enforcement, and I know I touched on this some during the first episode, but I want to reiterate this. Just because I'm doing this show does not mean that I have everything figured out. I do not. I learn every day and I fail every day. I get disappointed in myself. I look back at things and wish that I would have, changed the way that I reacted to things. So there has to be a level of discomfort knowing that you're putting yourself out there to potentially the whole world. Now, currently, we don't have a ton of viewers, and that's okay. We're getting started. And if we never have a ton of viewers, the few that listen, hey, I'm thankful. So you have to be able to be uncomfortable. You have to be able to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. We've talked some about that. But dealing with adversity and dealing with problems, whether they are minor or major, can be extremely uncomfortable. Now, because of my job and because of the things that I do, I will never go into specifics related to anyone individually because that's just not fair. That's not fair to them. If in the future somebody says, or they want to come on and talk about problems or things that were faced or situations, then that's one thing. But I'm never going to betray trust of someone in a situation that I've dealt with. It's not going to happen. Anything that I talk about will be in generalities of things that I've experienced. So, if you work with me or if you know who I am, you could probably figure out a situation or whatever that I might be referring to, but I'm never going to go into specifics on anything, and I'm not going to put myself or somebody else or the place that I work for into that type of situation. So when we talk about adversity, I've dealt with many things over my career through my life that have drawn me down, and I think part of what makes even minor issues feel major to me partially is the ADHD. Some of it is the anxiety and the defense mechanisms, walls that I've built up, things like that can make smaller situations feel extremely magnified. So I've talked to you about situations where I have acted rashly and lashed out and things like that. But let's look at, you are faced with a problem. Say it's at work or at home. A specific kind of example of this problem would be there is an assignment that needs to be done. You have been tasked as the supervisor to oversee this assignment. Now, resources are low, morale is low, and people are extremely overworked and worn down. How do you still push through that adversity and get the results that are desired while still maintaining a balance with the people you supervise? That's extremely difficult because in the example that I'm giving you, you look at it from, you have all of these factors where your people are tired, they're overworked, they're all of these, their morale's low and all these things, that in and of itself is a huge task to try to fix. But now you're given this other task that, is a fine deadline that needs to be carried out, needs to be finished, and results are expected. So you may feel like this is a lose-lose. Kinda is. There's an expression that, and again, the explicit language coming in a little bit here. The situation is a shit sandwich and everyone's going to take a bite. Sometimes it's just like that. You're going to embrace the suck and you're just going to have to push through. Now, as a leader on the front end of that, before the assignments are passed down and everything, really gets out the starting gate, you, as that, say, middle management or first line supervisor, need to be expressing to the upper management leadership that this should not be the priority right now. These are the circumstances that we're under, and unless this is mission critical that we get this done, my recommendation would be that this is moved to a later time in order for us to clean up some of the other things, get some people some rest, get some staffing in here, etc. You express that in a respectful but firm way. This is, you communicate up the chain, and Jocko Willink and Leif Babin and Extreme Ownership, they talk about communicating up and down the chain of command, and you really have to be able to explain that on the front end. Now, if it's mission critical and you're not going to get through it without just having to take a bite of the shit sandwich and get it done, then now you've got to bring in either your first line supervisors or your officers and say, all right, this is what's going on. This is what we have to do. Now, first off, I am completely, acutely aware of the situation that we've got going on with staffing and morale and all these different stressors that are happening. I've expressed those concerns, but this is apparently mission critical and it has to be finished. We have to do it. So I am tasking you all with A, B, and C. Is there anything that I can do to make this smoother for you? What can I do to help you achieve this goal in the easiest fashion? Now, you can say that, but you also have to be able to stand on it. So if you offer it, you better be willing to back it up. Now, I think some of the times, some of my first line supervisors, they don't want me involved because, they say that, you're very busy and I don't want to overstress you. But then the other side of it, and being a former first line supervisor, you don't want middle management hanging around getting in your way, because it's easier to get things done sometimes when you can just go ahead and handle it without extra scrutiny, if that makes sense. So I get that, but at the same time, I am willing to step in and to do the things that need to be done. Just sometimes don't feel very welcome, and I understand it. I completely understand it. So you enable your folks and you empower them to be able to carry out the mission, but you also stand by them, give them the tools that they need, understand their frustrations, and they may have another frustration that you didn't think about, that you still could probably communicate up the chain if it's something that could alter the mission, then that's your job. That's your responsibility. And I've heard supervisors in the past that, you know, when they were given issues to take up to upper management, that said, well, I'm not going to take that up because I don't want to upset the apple cart. What in the actual hell are you talking about? If this is a situation that is enough of a problem to where numerous employees are feeling the strain of it, that is your damn job to upset the apple cart. That is your job to be that squeaky wheel. Now, something that took me many years to learn, and I still haven't mastered this, is being respectful when you do it. We're working on it, work in progress, right? But that is absolutely your job to stand up for your folks and to communicate up the chain what the problem is. So if you are in a position of leadership, whether in your agency or in your job that you work, I don't care if it's at McDonald's and you're a shift supervisor, if your people have issues and you're not addressing that with upper management, you need to step down from your position. The pay raise is great. All things are good with that. I understand it. But if you can't make that change in yourself to make yourself better and be the supervisor that your people need, you need to step down from your position. Simple as that. And I've seen this throughout my career, and I know other people have because I've talked to many officers throughout my career that have communicated the same thing. You have folks who get into a supervisory position, whether it be through ass kissing or at one point they were just a super qualified person, and over time the luster of the job and everything faded away. Well, that's fine. That's fine that you feel that way. But you need to be able to be self aware enough to understand that I am not doing what I need to be doing right now. And by me being mentally checked out of my job, I am failing and letting down every single person that relies on me to be there for them. And if you do not have enough guts to look your people in the eye and say, I am doing everything that I can to help you, and know that you're telling the truth, and look at upper management in the eyes and look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am doing everything that I can, then it's time to make a change if you can't do that. And I've had to do that multiple times. I've felt myself slacking. I've got depressed or having a bad week or two. Hell, it happens. But you have to be aware enough to push yourself forward. Now, I know I went on a little bit of a rabbit hole on that one, but it's true. If you're not an effective leader, and I can assure you, unless you are absolutely oblivious, people will let you know, either through body language or other signs, that you're not doing your job. But if you're just completely oblivious and you're just thinking about your next golf game or your next trip to the lake, you really need to do a gut check, and you need to figure out what the hell's going on, because you're letting a lot of people down and you're creating a lot of stress in their life that's unnecessary because you are unwilling to push yourself further. So to get back on task here, when we're talking about communicating up and down the chain, and there was issues that first line supervisors could bring up, and you're trying to get that information back up if need be. But you offer your services, you do whatever you can do to help them, right, and to get them through that situation. Then you trust and verify. I've had a mentor over the last 20 years, and just recently he taught me that term: trust but verify. And I know he may not have came up with it, but man, it's super important. So you trust that the team members are going to carry out the task. You verify that they have all the tools and everything, all the resources that they need, and you verify that they're getting the job done. But you also trust that they're going to get the job done. So you're there, but you're not all up in their business, letting them handle their job, giving them the autonomy to be able to carry out tasks without you standing over their shoulders. So there's an example, right? And at the end of the day, when the dust settles and the task is complete, then you go back to the upper management and you explain, okay, the task is complete. This is what my people need. This is what our folks need from this point. They need to rest. They need time off. We need to get people in here. We need to find ways to boost morale, whether it be not a pizza party, but something to help them. Whatever the specifics may need. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little secret that I found out. You're not going to know what they need unless you ask. Sometimes people will come to you and they'll tell you, hey, LT, I need this. Sarge, I need this. But most of the time, there's going to be that driver window to driver window, and you all have seen it. The cop cars that pull up window to window with each other in a parking lot. And that's where the real discussions happen. They are solving the department's problems at that point. So those are the folks you need to talk to, and you may not decide to go with their recommendation, but you can find a common ground, and you can find things to boost that morale and to show them that you and the agency are actually putting in the effort and actually give a damn about them. So consider that. Think about it. You don't know everything. Hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. We've talked a little bit about leadership equity, and if you have a team that you've been with for a long time and you have a really good bond with folks, you can have this really good amount of equity built up to where they know and trust you because of things you've done in the past and things like that. But on the vein of adversity, it doesn't take but one really bad thing or several moderately inconvenient things to continue to pop up to where you're really digging into that bank account on the leadership equity, because you're having to put out fires faster than you can. You've got fires popping up faster than you can put them out. And that's when you have to rely on your upper management and your first line supervisors to help you. You can't do it all. I know. For those of you that know me, you may have different opinions on it, but like, I really sometimes just try to do things myself to a fault. Um, and then, hell, I'll be honest with you. Giving people assignments, and I know this is wrong, and we're talking about leadership and things like that, but asking someone to do something makes me feel guilty. Um, and here's why. I know from an officer's perspective that they have a shit ton on their plate, going from call to call, not knowing whether they're going to get to finish their lunch or whether they're going to go home on time, whether they're going to miss that T-ball game and things like that. And then when you transition from that patrol officer or first line supervisor to, a desk jockey, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, it, it should change your perspective to a degree, but it also makes me feel guilty because, 4 or 5 o'clock, depending, I'm going home. These folks were there before I was, and they're still going to be there when I go home. And so these little tasks that I might give them, it makes me feel guilty. Because what if I finish my task early and I've sent them off on something, and now they get slammed with it, and now I'm done. Now I have downtime. Do I still just rely on them to do it? No. If you have downtime and your folks are getting slammed out there on the road, or, in the business world, they're getting slammed and you're sitting back, one of the worst things you can do, and you will lose a ton of credibility, is to give someone who's already overburdened a task and then they come back and see you twiddling your damn thumbs. So you better be able to adapt and say, okay, I'm finished. I can take up this task again and I can complete it because I know that they're busy. That's how, for me, I get over the guilt. If it's something that I can handle and that person can be freed up if they're busy, then I will try to take that back over. But you have to be able to also depend on your folks to carry out the task and to complete the task. Now, when we're talking about, like I said earlier, you're slammed and these fires keep popping up. And when I say fires, I'm not talking about literal fires. I'm talking about these, situations that pop up, and it might be an emergency to someone else, but to you it may seem pretty trivial, but yet now you got to handle it, right? Those are the types of things that happen quite often. You're focused on your task at hand, and then all of a sudden, boom, I've got to snap into this, handle it, and then try to get refocused back into what I was doing. And when you do that multiple times, um, it can be distracting. But the other fires that I'm referring to is those interpersonal issues. When you have folks that just cannot get along. And if you've never been in middle management, yeah, that's going to be a new experience for you, because you get to manage that. And it's tough because you are going to have your perspective, and person A and person B are going to have their perspective. And just like going to a domestic, you got to be able to look at it from both sides. And I've heard it said, There's truth in every story, but nobody's ever going to tell the full truth, right? That's not always the case, but look at it from they're telling the truth from their perspective, what they have seen and what they've observed, and their emotions that they have tied up in it. And now you have to come in here as this third party and try to figure out what the safest solution is. Now, I've seen this happen. Well, you guys need to get over it and you need to go back to work. All right, this is not kindergarten. Suck it up. Deal with it. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Well, what have you done at that point as a leader when you say, get over it, stop talking about it, go on, I don't want to hear any more about it again? You have just lit a fuse on a bomb. Because remember when I was talking about the window to window cop cars? That's going to explode later. You have to be able to meet and figure out the root of the problem. And you have to be strong enough to put things aside and work through things. Most of the time, what we find out, a lot of it can be boiled down to communication issues, or a misperception. It's super easy. We just have to work together. But those fires can grow, and if you don't put them out, you know, you're going to be drowning in different situations, and your equity that you've built up with people is going to quickly diminish. And then you're going to feel absolutely useless as a leader. So, LP, how do I make sure that never happens? Well, I'm going to tell you, I don't know of a way that you can make sure that that never happens. But what I can tell you is that you have to be prepared that if it does happen, to do and to be able to give it 110%, to see as many and if you can to the other side of that problem together and reunite as one team. And it's going to be hell, but you have to be able to work together to push through that situation and make it through to the other side. And you, as the leader, have to be unwilling to stop, because there are going to be folks that are going to wander off. They're going to try to turn back and or start attacking each other. You have to be able to walk behind them with your arms spread wide, kind of just pushing them towards the shoreline. Let's go, come on. And you can't stop. Now, when you're not in the thick of it, you can step back and evaluate. And I encourage you to reach out to people that are more experienced in the situation, or may have been through a situation similar to what you're going through as a leader. But at the end of the day, the way that you handle that situation will be reflective upon your ability to put equity back in that bank as well. If you explode and you don't handle the situation properly, it is a fickle kind of dance when it comes to situations like that. You have to be able to toe the line a little bit. It's not the military where you've enlisted and you know you have no choice but to follow orders. There is a choice in law enforcement. They can say, "I quit," and go somewhere else, and now you're short staffed, and now you're dealing with other issues. Um, and that's the same thing in the business world. I'm out. Good luck. And that's not what we want. That's not what you know I want personally. That's not what anyone at the agency wants. Is to just have people leave left and right. I can tell you from personal experience that's a nightmare. Um, it weighs on everybody, but you have to be able to, no matter what the circumstances are, you can identify, yeah, they suck. But you have to be able to keep pushing. Um, so later on, I talked a little bit about, I think it was the first episode, and we talked about dealing with COVID and Hurricane Helene, which I think by the time it made landfall, um, could have been tropical storm depending on where you were. Uh, I intend to do an episode, or perhaps two, specifically to um, Helene, and I don't want to get into that quite yet, but I can assure you that is an adversity that not only I, but many other first responders and people had to go through. It probably one of the worst experiences of my life was during Helene. And, but on the other side of that coin, I got to see some of the best out of people in community, the officers that I had the pleasure to serve with, and my family. I Situations like that make these minor inconveniences or these minor grievances or whatever they may be seem pretty damn insignificant when you're in the thick of something like that. So I think if we, as leaders, as people, as officers, whatever your place is, can look at how bad it could be and while also, you know, respecting how people feel and understanding it. But if I'm the one having the grievance and I'm having the issue, if I can take just a moment and consider how bad it could be and weigh the situation that we went through, if I put both situations on a scale, how bad does this current issue that I'm currently facing, how much significance does this have compared to a situation like Helene? Probably not very much. So while it might seem fun or have a good release to get angry and to blow up over something minor. We are all still dealing with the after effects of Helene. And, and it's not just North Carolina. There were several states that just got the shit kicked out of them. So I do find it interesting, and I am not going to get into politics because honestly, I just don't care about politics that much. I don't watch the news. I can't stand it. It's too stressful. So, but I will say this, what I have seen on the social media that I do get on and do occasionally look at comments. I know I shouldn't. But sometimes you just glance, it's just right there and you just happen to see it. And social media knows. It's almost like they've got you figured out. And they do. I'm sure there's an algorithm in AI that figures out this is the comment that's going to piss him off. And that's the one they put up there on that little highlight comment when you're just scrolling past and you just click on the picture and you're like, okay, what's going on? Oh, no, you didn't. The moral of why I'm getting into this is that we have gone from people who were extremely appreciative of what others were doing for them during the thick of Helene right back to being keyboard warriors and running your mouth and running other people down. Now, I'm not talking about people just talking bad about law enforcement, but like in general, for God's sakes, people, like, be kind to each other. If something bothers you on social media and you feel like you got to say something as somebody who has done that in the past, take a step back and understand that most of the time, and I don't want to overinflate this number, but I'm just going to guess at this statistic. And as you know, that 75% of all statistics are actually made up. That was a joke. I would say around 80% of the people don't care what you have to say in your little snide comment about somebody else. So just keep it to yourself. But, I understand the psychology behind it. It gives them a sense of empowerment. It gives them a dopamine rush and blah, 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 blah. So the moral of the story on this is to be kind to one another, to love one another, and to build each other up. And, don't take everything so seriously. There are times when, yeah, you got to understand that shit has hit the fan and you need to buckle down and get ready for it. You need to get through the situation. But every little minor inconvenience in your life is not going to result in a season-ending, life-altering event. So stop acting like it. Okay? Relax. I know this is pot calling the kettle black, so to speak, but anybody that knows me knows that I don't relax, but I am working on dialing back overreactions to small things. And I can tell you it's an everyday case by case basis. So again, not sitting here telling you that I've got everything figured out, but I can identify it and I'm working to change that behavior. Because I know that in my professional life, the way that I react can affect how others react. And I want you all to remember that as leaders. Remember formal and informal. As a formal leader, your actions and your sense of panic or anger outbursts and things like that, especially in public settings, can affect the morale of the entire place. Informal leaders, your reactions fuel the fire. So if you think about it, informal leadership, let's look at it. I went camping last weekend, so I'm gonna make a kind of off the cuff visualization for you here. You know, when you look at a fire and it has the coals at the bottom, the foundation of the fire, where the main source of the heat, where the fuel is down there and it's broken down. What if that's your informal leadership? Your folks that are down there really pushing the heat up, handling, and then your formal leadership can go all the way up to the top, to the embers that are floating up and the flames dancing across the night sky. um, that was weird, but if you're in an informal leadership setting and you are at the bottom of that fire, and I'm not saying that in a perspective of rank or anything like that, and you're at the bottom, that's not what I mean by that. What I'm saying is that if you're fueling that fire with these minor inconveniences and you're blowing up about it and you're growing, and it's essentially like a large gust of oxygen just being fed into a bed of coals. The top portion of the flames can be out and you could just have a bed of coals there. But if just enough air gets blown into that fire, it erupts back, sometimes larger than it was before. So think about that when you're dealing with an adversity as an informal leader or even as a formal leader. If you allow these minor situations to blow air onto the flame that could, potentially destroy the entire organization, or, what someone's perspective of you may be, or however it might be, please, I beg you to take a little bit of time and weigh out the significance of, is this adversity that I'm facing or this problem significant enough to be the hill that I die on, or the hill that I am going to, push my team to? Like, is this what we need to focus everything on? Or is this something that could be handled at a later time, or that I need to just let go, or discuss with a mentor on what best ways to handle it? But having that knee-jerk reaction and just kicking it into high gear is really going to not do you or your team any favors. So, getting close to wrapping up, what I want you to think about this week, and I want you to take your notebook out. I want you to write this down. And I'm hoping, if you are keeping a notebook that you're, keep it to yourself, and just use it as a guide to help yourself get better. But are there any events or anything that you can think of recently that you've experienced in which you may have overreacted? So we do it like the columns, like we did last week: overreaction versus underreaction or appropriate reaction. So you could do three columns. Okay, so I spilled my coffee the other day and I overreacted. I screamed out cuss words in the kitchen. Um, or I spilled my coffee and my appropriate reaction was I got a paper towel, I dampened it, wiped up the mess, threw the paper towel away, poured myself a little more coffee, went about my day. Or underreaction, I just left the coffee sitting on the counter and I just went to work. So think about maybe a situation or several situations and how your reaction to that situation, did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Or did it stay the same? So if you hear any like wild whiskey noises in the background, I'm not in a windstorm. It's my water filtration system for the house, so it's going in the background. I'll try to clean it up as much as I can with the editing, but just in case, I'm not standing out in a cyclone in the middle of this. The second part that I want you to think about is how you have pushed through an adversity. How have you um, overcome a problem that you've been faced with recently, or maybe a major problem in your life? How have you persevered through that situation? Or on the other side of it, if you fell short, what do you know now that would have helped you then to get through that situation? So jot those ideas down. I want you to think about them this week. I will be traveling some, but I'm going to try to get one out. So the next podcast you may hear will probably be done with some just some headphones. I'll probably have to use my headphones to record the next one. But let's get through these problems together. Let's be kind to one another. Remember, don't overreact. Be sweet to each other. Love each other. Take care of one another. I'll see you next week. I will remind you, if you like what you're hearing, hit the like button. If you're seeing it on YouTube or whatever, or follow us on the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm still trying to get all the videos onto YouTube, but that lets me know that you're interested in the content. Feel free to leave me a comment. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope you have a blessed week. Take care of yourselves. God bless.